This tutorial is going to look at creating your picture, but using Graphmatica. So what you're going to need up on your screen is your Excel spreadsheet, so this linear equations spreadsheet that you have, and we're going to start by manipulating this, and then we'll get Graphmatica open and see how we can graph it. So our first step here is to hide these values, so we actually don't need to see our gradient, our y-intercept or our x-intercept in order to graph it. So what we're going to do is we're going to highlight, in my case, from Z through to N. That should be the same on your screen. So if you highlight those screens, then right click up the top and you'll have an option to hide. So we just hid that, and when we do it, it disappears. So we no longer have to see that. Now the other thing that you have to be aware of is that we're going to have to identify how far we want our lines to go. So my very first line of y equals -7 is going to span between x values of 7 and an x value of 9. So I've just highlighted the two x values. Notice that in my y equation I highlight my x values. So I'm going to graph this line between x equals 7 and x equals 9. And I can do this the same thing for all of my equations. My next one, which is x equals 9, I'm going to graph between my y values of -7 and my y value of 15. So I highlight those 2 points. Now I'm going to do this all the way down because it just makes it really clear later as to which ones I'm actually graphing between. So highlighting all the way through. Note again that if your equation is an x equal, then you are highlighting a y value, and if it's a y equals, you're highlighting an x value. We're now up to getting Graphmatica open, so we're going to minimize our Excel spreadsheet. You have a choice. You could print this or minimize it. Considering your screens are so small, it might be worth printing it, just so you can have it as a reference and you can tick it off as you go. But for this tutorial, I'm just going to minimize it. So by minimize, I still have it, or window it. I will still have it, but it will be smaller on my screen. So putting that over to the right hand side of my screen. So I can still see all my equations, and I can see my my points as well. Now if you click on your start menu and your search bar, we're actually going to search for Graphmatica. So when we do this, Graphmatica is spelled just graph and then no spaces, M-A-T-I-C-A, Graphmatica. When you search it, it'll come up with this emblem, and it is preloaded onto all of your computers, so it is on there. If you select this, it will come up with Graphmatica. Now we're going to resize this screen. We want it to fit on so I can see my equations in Excel and my Graphmatica screen. So resizing this so it all fits, and we're up to graphing. When graphing in Graphmatica, this bar up the top here is your I suppose your entry line. So this is where we're going to put our equations. So if I was to type in my first equation of y equals -7 and press enter to make it graph, I get a straight line at y equals -7. So that's down here. Alright, obviously when I actually have my flower, I don't want a line that keeps going forever and forever and forever. So instead I'm going to limit how far this line goes. And we can do that using the values that we put in bold before. So we put in bold 7 and 9. So what we're going to do is we're going to do what we call a domain and type in here, using our curvy brackets, what we type is, so curvy bracket, x, then 2 dots, 7, 9. 7 and 9 are coming from what I've bolded. You always have to do your smallest number first. So for instance, when I have my line 8, I have an x value of 8 and a y value of 10. I do have to start with 8 and then work to 10. So it's going to be x dot dot 7 comma 9 and curvy bracket to close it. Now when I press enter for this, it's going to graph it, but we can't see it because we've already graphed this line which goes over exactly the same place, it just goes further. So we have to get rid of this line that we already graphed. We can do that by selecting our drop down here. This will show you any equations you've already graphed. So I've graphed this one just now, and I graphed this one before, and this y equals -7 is the one that I'm going to delete. So I'm going to select it, and then I use this button here, this cross, to delete that line. And notice that that line is now gone, but I am still left with my equation of y equals -7 between 7 and 9. So you're going to do it like this. You're going to put in a domain for each of your lines, or indeed a range. So if we continue, now what I'm doing here is notice that you can't really see all of my line. It's gone off the page. So I'm going to change my grid range so that I can actually see where my picture is going to be. If you look at your hand-drawn picture, you look at your x-axis, if your lowest number on your x-axis is -10, then you should be putting -10 here. If your highest number is 20, put in 20. If you look at your y-axis and your lowest number is -5, then use -5. And if your highest is 50, use 50. So forth. I'm just going to put in what suits my picture. So if I do this, I'll put in -5, 20, -10, and 30. Press OK, and it moves what you can see on the page. I'm going to continue to graph each of my lines consecutively. So if I've got x equals to 9, I type in x equals to 9, and it's going to be ranged between y values of -7 and 15. So I graph that. I continue doing this process for all of my lines, and I start to draw my picture. Now this should look like what you have on your draft page. Now the only thing that might be different is it might look a little bit squished or a little bit stretched, but the process is still the same. So, or the picture will still be the same. We'll just change it later so that it looks right. So putting in each of my equations, and I'm up to equation 9, I believe. Okay, if something goes wrong along the way, don't panic about it. You can just get rid of a line. So you can get rid of any line that you want. In this particular case, I'm in the middle of graphing line number 13. So -2x plus 23 between 2 and 4. So my domain's correct, but I've got plus 35 instead of plus 23. So I'm going to graph this, and we note that my line goes way up here. Now that's obviously not what it's supposed to look like, so something's gone wrong. So you can select your line that you've got using your arrow, and then you can delete it. So we're going to do that now. I just pressed the cross, okay, and I've deleted that line. Now I'm back to rewriting. So this is what I had entered, and I'm going to change the 35, to a 23. And graph that, and now I've got the line that it's supposed to be. So at any point you can redo a line without any problems whatsoever. So finishing off my drawing, you can use decimals or you can use fractions. If you're going to use a fraction, which is normally better, please put the fraction into a bracket, just so that there's no mistakes. Alright, I've graphed my picture. I'm finished. So technically I don't need my Excel spreadsheet anymore. I'm now looking at taking my drawing from here and saving it. So what do I actually upload into LMS? So what I'm going to do is, if I go to Save As, I'm going to save as, in my particular case, I'm going to call it flower. So when I save this as flower, I've already saved a copy, so I'm just going to replace it. So I've saved this now as flower, and if I go into my documents, I can find this. Now when you save it as a Graphmatica file, so a GR file. This is fine. This is what I want you to email me, please. Okay, I need an email copy of your Graphmatica file. What you're going to put into your LMS, however, is a PDF version of this picture. So if you actually go and press File Print, you can print this as a PDF. So we're going to go File Print, and then we're going to choose in our printers Qt PDF Writer. So you should have a printer called Qt PDF Writer. And if you select that, then press OK. It will send it to this printer, which is like a digital printer in your computer. And then it will pop up with a Save As file. We're going to call it Graphmatica, in my case, flower. And I'm saving it to my desktop. So if I press Save to that, and then I go to my desktop, it exists there as a Graphmatica flower. It is a PDF, and if I open that, I find it as a PDF, including my equations down the bottom. So those equations are important. You will need to have those. That's done. So I've graphed my flower. I would upload this PDF into my ePortfolio, and I will email your teacher with the Graphmatica file for your flower or your picture.